Hello, world. Welcome back. You're probably watching this on YouTube, but hello to everyone else. I am Alexander Campanella of ethosananda.com. Here's a QR code. You can check out my website. I have got a presentation to you today on natural law. This is a topic that's so important that I just have to share it with you all, and I'd like to get into it as soon as possible. Now, all the slides you're going to see today, almost all of them, are from Mark Passio, and I'm just being upfront with that at the beginning. And if you want to learn more about it, please go to him. So his website is whatonearthishappening.com, because that's exactly what he teaches. If you have a feeling that maybe there's something wrong with the world today, well, you're right. There's many things wrong with the world today. And basically it comes down to going against or outside of natural law. And the one great work, as you can see in the logo here, is to discover and enlighten others about natural law. So there are some basic principles of natural law I'm going to go over briefly. What is natural law? Well, just look at the words. It's the law of nature. So one example might be gravity. Gravity is one kind of natural law, although it's largely irrelevant and impractical for us unless you're doing a physics experiment or you're doing some sort of sport. It really doesn't matter if you believe in gravity or don't believe in gravity, if you practice it or don't practice it. It's a law of nature, but it's a law of nature that doesn't really matter, whereas these principles here actually do matter. They actually affect 90% or more of our daily life and daily moment-to-moment consciousness, and that's going to determine how our life affects others around us, and so on. Now, natural law comes from nature. Nature comes from God. So this is not really God's law. It's not really religion as such. Although it's kind of close, but basically natural law is in between God's law and man's law. Now, man's law is garbage. That's why we have trouble in the world today. Like in the United States, for instance, you can be in one state and they allow you to have, let's say, like, I don't know, you can buy a crossbow in one state, but then you travel across a border, maybe it could be just a 10-minute drive away, and you're in another state and you're not allowed to buy a crossbow in that state. That's man's law, which is temporary, subject to change, and it basically just comes from the whims of some fallible entities called men, humans. And that's why it's not actually law. So we call it law, and you go to a court of law, and they have lawyers, L-A-W-Y-E-R, law as in lawyer, but it's not actually law. It's regulation. And these regulations can change. And that's why they're not law. Law means something you cannot change, something which is simply true and always true. Law is another word for truth. And so the word Torah in Hebrew, which is, the Bible of the Hebrew faith, Torah also means law, and the Torah is the truth. These are synonymous. This is the same thing. So natural law, these basic principles of natural law, these are eternally true within this natural and material plane. All right, so I want to get started. And obviously this is Ethos Ananda, so I'm going to, whenever I can, show how natural law corresponds to Aristotle and Srila Prabhupada, or in general, ancient Greek philosophy, it's ethos, and Eastern mysticism or spirituality, which I would call Ananda for short. Now, most of this material comes from Hermeticism. I'd love to talk more about that, but I'm just going to shoot that out there and we'll keep going. The first principle is mentalism. This is the most important one, probably of the seven, which is the one we are, I think, most lacking in especially the modern Western world, especially the first world Western countries like America, where I am now, and Canada and other similar countries. We are in a materialistic society. This entire physical world is basically a simulation and a mental projection. Doesn't mean it's not real, but the basic idea for mentalism is that the source of everything, the source of everything physical, is mental. There's a mental source for everything, including your own body. The way this works is you are born, that is, your soul comes from somewhere else, and it finds a certain sperm, egg, whatever, and then when the soul is conceived in that tiny little cell structure, then the consciousness or the mental subtle body of the soul basically tells the physical reality to do what it knows how to do and reproduce cells and do all this stuff. But as soon as you take the soul and the consciousness out of the body, that's called death. That's what death is. And when you die, your body also disintegrates because there's no life in it anymore. Life means consciousness. Consciousness means mental energy or spiritual energy. These are all basically the same thing. I'm not going to be reading these slides. That's why this is a video presentation. Feel free to pause the video at any point and take your time reading these. But we're going to move on. Correspondence. This is probably the most popular principle of natural law that a lot of people are familiar about. And you've probably heard this saying before, as above, so below. That is a direct quote from Hermeticism, which comes from Hermes, which is thousands of years old. And basically what I've discovered is that Hermes is the great-grandfather of the West. Before Jesus, before Aristotle, there was Hermes. This is actually where the Western world comes from. Hermes in ancient Egypt was known as Thoth. So this goes all the way back to ancient Egypt, and actually before Egypt, it goes to Atlantis. Goes that far back. If you'd like to learn more about this, I've compiled a Bible of all of the Hermetic, all the most important Hermetic texts. So hit me up for that. The macrocosm, that's the great cosmos, the external world, and so on. Microcosm, micro means small, that's us, our body and our own internal life. So this is a mirror image of each other. They're actually the same thing. So you may think one thing is big, one thing is small, so they're different. No, that's definitively wrong. The way the universe actually works is that it's holographic, which means self-similar across all scales. Aristotle did mention this. So man is the measure of all things. You can read about that in my Ethos Bible, which is still available on my site. This is my favorite example of the principle of correspondence. On the top right here, we have an atom, proton, neutron, electron structure, and then bottom left here we have a galaxy, a solar system, I think, actually. Anyway, you can clearly see the similarity. This is the same geometrical structure. It's the same thing, just two different scales. That's correspondence. This is the best example I can think of, which is really quite clear for any child to see, actually. Because it's so clear, it's really important we teach these things to children as early as possible, because if they simply, it's very easy to get. So if they really solidly get it at a young age, then a lot of these mind control things and propaganda things we're seeing will not work on them, because this is undeniable truth. Okay, so here's applying the principle of correspondence to the information world we live in. So some people are getting a pure information stream, like if you're reading the Ethos Bible, that's a great example. The Bhagavad Gita, the natural law principles we're talking about here, the Bible, the gospel of Christ, the Quran is pure, I think. I haven't read it yet. That's the only reason I'm not sure. And there's many great parts of the Old Testament as well. And of course, there's mathematics, science. If you're actually doing those fields of study correctly, then you're living in truth. And from that pure information, truth, etc., that will go into this bucket, that's you. So there's the input from the pure truth information comes into you. And then just by living naturally, you don't have to be a teacher or anything, but just by how you live, there will naturally be an output from that into the world. And that's just the great world of we're all in it together, right? But many people are getting poisoned information, mistruth, disinformation, yada, 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 fake news. But actually what's worse than fake news, it's not that it's people are following things that are wrong or untrue. It's that they're just not following anything. They're just, following their senses. So if someone says something that makes them feel good, then they think that's true. That's not how truth works, though. You have to use logic and you have to study things to actually know for yourself if it's true or not. If you're not doing that, then you are likely getting poisoned information. So that's coming into your little bucket here, and then just by living naturally, however you live, whatever your job is, doesn't matter, there will naturally be an output into the world of your poisoned information, which will poison the world. And this is just correspondence. So if we can just go from poisoned information to pure information, the world in general will start becoming more pure. It's really that simple. Vibration, this is now becoming more and more popular in the New Age world, and it is a principle of reality. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. This also corresponds with correspondence. So this is true at a fundamental level, at a advanced high level, like for planets and stars, and for little nanoparticles. Like there's always vibration everywhere. Every sound you hear, every color you see, it's all vibration. Matter is merely energy in a state of vibration. This one may be tricky to practice, but the main part here we want to look at is how it's simply a undeniable and fundamental aspect of reality. It's a law of nature, which we do not get to change. So we can either learn about this and be aware of it and incorporate it into our consciousness, or we can ignore it and, say, oh, it's New Age, or, say, oh, it's not relevant, or this or that, and we will suffer accordingly. This also corresponds to the first principle of mentalism. There is no real solidity in this physical world. It seems solid, but it's not. Everything is vibrating because these vibrations, these energy wavelengths have a source to them. They're emanating from where? From here, from our own minds and from the great mind and the super soul and all that stuff. Polarity, this is one I've been practicing for a long time. This is 60% of the Ethos Bible, what Aristotle talks about. You have two extremes, too much or too little. That's a polarity. And then the golden mean in the middle, that is virtue. That is excellence. So the way polarity works, if you're practicing the principle of polarity, especially in the Hermetic sense, you're doing the same thing Aristotle talked about. And this is also the same exact thing Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita, where yoga, the art of all work, is really simple. It's just not being in a state of polarity. That's what yoga means, according to the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita. Not too much, not too little. Don't eat too much, don't eat too little. Don't sleep too much, don't sleep too little. That's chapter 2, verse 48, I'm pretty sure, in the Gita. Now, because it's all vibration, it doesn't matter which side of the pole you're on, male or female, day or night, top or down. These are all different polarities, right? Whichever side of the pole you're on, it's still one pole. It's still the same vibration. You're just on different ends of it. And the conclusion here is that anything paradoxical can be reconciled. There's no real paradox. Everything is whole. Everything is perfect. But it maybe doesn't seem that way because there is polarity. It's a natural law. It's just part of nature. So the more we can start to see these things in our reality, because they are actually there, so the more we can see them, then the more control over them we have. And I'm not saying the whole goal of this is to become overlords or whatever, but we do want to have control over our own reality. That you could say that's our birthright, actually. So I bid you all good luck into fulfilling your birthright as human beings and conscious beings. Rhythm, there's inertia. That's the word I would use to describe rhythm. It's kind of like inertia in physics. Here it talks about a pendulum swing. Tides, the tides of the ocean is a great example of the natural law of rhythm. The tides go in and out. And breath, we all breathe. That is a great example of rhythm. Rhythm which we don't get to change. You don't get to stop breathing. You don't get to do that. Rhythm is just a natural part of life. There's a rhythm to our sleep cycle, just like there's a rhythm to our breathing cycle, just like there's a rhythm to our heartbeat. So as you're seeing so many more examples more and more, it should become more and more obvious and self-evident that rhythm is indeed a natural law. Cause and effect, also called the law of karma, same thing. Every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause. And this is like a good overarching principle of natural law that shows really how everything is law, actually. At the core, there is only law. So if you're in like a court, if you're in a school, or if you're in a sport, if you're in some temporary world in man's law, the city of man, not the city of God, not the city of nature, but the city of man, which is corrupt and temporary and stupid, basically. There are injustices, there is corruption, but it's not forever. Whatever injustice you think you saw happening, and they're getting away with it. No, they're not. They're not. In the ultimate end, they're not. In this life or the next, we will pay for everything we do. There is no escaping it. Now, there's really just one main practical aspect of the principle of cause and effect, and that is that there are two planes of reality. So the plane of effects in the physical world is a different plane of being, or ontology, whatever you want to call it, than the plane of causality, which once again is the mental world. The whole physical world originally comes from the mental world. What this means is, if you see a bad effect in the world, election fraud, whatever it is, the war, people dying, it's horrible. Those are effects. So, if you fight the effects, you change nothing. Because those effects came from a cause. So, until we deal with the causes of these effects, they will keep happening. Great example I just thought of is medicine. So, if you're treating the symptom, you're treating the effect. That's why it doesn't work. So, the best medicine finds the original cause, not just of the symptom, but of the disorder. The symptom is just a sign of a disorder, and then the disorder comes from a cause. When you can find the cause and alleviate it or change it or whatever, then everything after that, all of the whole chain of effects will start to change, because the effects come from the cause. It's really that simple. Once again, all power to effect change in the world, in your world, in the big world, it all comes from the plane of causality, the mental world. And that's why it's really important for us to study and learn and teach others about natural law. This is the one great work. until we as a species really understand that fighting or changing the effects does nothing, whereas educating, thinking differently, changing consciousness is actually what will change the world. Until we all get that, we're going to be in the same world. Nothing will change. Here's another good graphic to look at it simply. Gender, this is a tough one. And not just because of the, pop culture today. At least for me, it's actually quite tough. It's easy to see how gender is part of mammalian life, human life, because we have gender. We have male and female genitalia. But how can you see the natural law principle of gender applied to computers or basketball? It's kind of hard to see how gender is applied to everything in nature, but it indeed can be. A great example is in geometry. So a straight line is masculine and a curve is feminine. So this also means a square is masculine and a circle is feminine. And because everything ultimately comes from geometry and mathematics, that's like a root structure, we can see the same thing. So like in computers, for instance, I would say the hardware is masculine and the root structure of the software is also masculine because it's just binary code. But as soon as you get into UX, designing something in software, that's when all the feminine energy starts to get involved. So this may be harder to see, but gender does manifest on all planes. The best example that's most practical is the human brain. Now, gender is within our body. This is the left brain and the right brain. This is why it's such a great example, because regardless of if you're man or woman, your brain is cut in half. There's two halves of it, and one of them is masculine, one of them is feminine. So and this is a good example because remember, mentalism, the physical gender we have ultimately comes from the mental realm. Mental can be masculine or feminine. There's a constant back and forth happening here, and these need to be in balance. So as we'll find out in the next presentation about the occult and how these natural law principles can be perverted by the dark occultists, by satanic, demonic people, used to mind control and to exploit others for selfish gain. This is one of the primary methods, is mental gender mind control, by making people overly masculine or overly feminine and taking them out of balance in that very simple fundamental left brain, right brain balance. By simply shaking up the balance in your brain, you can control someone. You can get them to do crazy, stupid things. This is the primary method of mind control, actually, I've found out. And even if you study NLP and psychology, psychotherapy, as I have, very few people talk about this because it's so simple. It's so fundamental and so simple that, it's like hard to put it into a class, into a university class, because it's so simple. Everyone else is focusing on some advanced technique, but really, if you don't have balance in your brain, it's just another case of treating the symptom instead of treating the root cause, which should be balance. There has to be balance in there. Polarity. This is a polarity principle right here. There's a natural polarity between left brain and right brain. And when that polarity is reconciled, when they're in balance, you have health, mental health, physical health, excellence, virtue. So those are the 7 principles of natural law. 8th principle, the lost principle, which is care. And I don't mean that in the feminine way of just, I care about you. But care is and you could also use the word love, and you could also use generate or generative principle. But we still don't have a good definition of what this means. Care means, really, it means focusing your consciousness on one thing. Living your life as if what you care about is important to you. when you take your care and you apply that care towards, let's say, natural law and discovering these principles and practicing them, by using this principle of care, that's how you actually improve and ascend. If, on the other hand, you don't care, and let's say you're, watching this presentation right now, but you're on your phone and you're playing a golf game, as I used to do, you're on Facebook or something, that means you don't care. And when you don't care, you don't actually learn it. When you don't actually learn it, nothing gets better. So care is how we actually make things better. And care is also why the world today, especially in America, is so bad. This is why we're seeing heinous violence, like people shooting each other, mass shootings. This is just care. It's just a lack of care. It's really that simple. These people who are committing these crimes, they are not cared for. They are not loved. So they are lashing out. And they also don't care about themselves. They don't care about others. They don't care about themselves. They often hate themselves. They're self-loathing. And the society in general also does not care. Most of us are thinking, oh, it's over there. I don't care. It's not me. It's not my family. I'm safe from these mass shootings. We'll see how long that lasts. A great example of how you can use care in a society to actually prevent terrorism and heinous acts of violence is India and Japan. There was a huge terrorist bombing in India in Mumbai, I don't know, 20 years ago or something. I don't know how many people died. It was a big bomb that went off, classic kind of terrorism. But what happened after? The entire country of billions of people cared. They said, we're going to do a huge spiritual grieving process and lighting candles all over the world, all over the country at the same time. The whole country came together and said, we are sad. We are broken and hurt by this. We care. We do not want to let this happen again. And because they cared so much and they did what was required to heal whatever that problem was, guess what? It didn't happen again. There might have been one or two small terrorist attacks after that, but nothing like America where it keeps on happening. And in Japan, they have a different style, of course, but still it's the same principle of care. There was a big terrorist attack in the subway somewhere. So one thing Japan did, how they use care is, they're very logical, planning-oriented people. So they said, oh, how were these bombs able to get on the trains? Well, these terrorists were able to use the waste bin, so all the public waste bins. They could hide dangerous elements in those waste bins. So Japan said, in a very quick, decisive action, which is indicative of care. If you really care about something, you act right away. That's how you know someone cares. The more you put it off, means the more you don't care. So what did Japan do? They said, all right, no more waste bins. And I can tell you from living 3 months in Japan, they're still doing it. It's hard to find a waste bin in Tokyo, Kyoto, everywhere I went. It's hard to find a waste bin, and it's annoying, it's inconvenient, but for locals who remember this terrorist attack, in the back of their heads, I'm sure they're thinking a lot, well, guess what? It's safer now. And I'm glad that, this little inconvenience I have to suffer so that I can have the benefit of a much safer country. And there's other things I'm sure Japan did. I haven't studied this in detail in Japan or India. I haven't studied these in detail, but I do know that there is not a continuous string of terrorist attacks. These are flukes, and they are flukes because they care. People who do not care and societies who do not care, it's not a fluke. Bad things will keep happening because when you don't care, when you don't love, there is entropy. Things will just destruct. They will destroy. That's kind of, entropy is like a natural law in physics, right? Same idea. We can see the same thing here. And what if you're a father to a young kid and you say, this kid's annoying, he's crying a lot. I don't care about him. I'm just not going to feed him. I'm just not going to do anything. Well, that kid can die. It's very easy to happen. So care is driving everything. G for generative. And this could be what the G in the Freemason logo refers to. Some people believe it means God. I think it's probably more accurately represented by the word generative or generate. Especially considering the word mason, which is all about building, right? So generate is another word for build. And it's an old Latin word, genere, which means create, which is just like build. Masons are about building. Makes perfect sense to me. Now, I'm not sure how exactly this corresponds to the principles of natural law, but the idea of the lost word, this is another really practical thing, which we don't have in a lot of places in the world today, and that's why we're suffering. People do not know how to say no. For instance, when you really care about your own freedom, your own rights, your own autonomy, and someone says, oh, hey, did you hear about all the people dying about the virus? Well, hey, buddy, we got the thing for you. We've got this experimental mRNA injection. Hey, man, it's going to solve all our problems. I'm just going to put this experimental medicine right into your body, okay? And if you don't, we're going to, fire you or whatever. There were some people like myself who said, no, just no. I never had to be mean about it to anyone. I just no. Sorry. And because I care enough about myself and the truth and so on, and everyone else, when I'm serious about that, they pick up on it right away and they say, oh, if I keep pushing on this, what's going to happen? He's going to keep pushing back. And we don't like that. So people left me alone because I said no. And if every single person said no, there would have not been a vaccine. There would have not been a lockdown. All of that stuff would have not happened. If we simply cared, we knew our rights, and we simply said no. You don't have to be mean. No is not a mean word. It's not a nice word. Just like yes is not a good positive word. It's just yes. Yes just means affirmative. And no means no affirmative. It doesn't have to be a gender to it. No just means no. But no only works when you care, when you're doing it from a place of self-power and self-knowledge. That's the key. And that's why we're talking about this now and not at the very beginning of the presentation. When you know natural law, when you know God's law, when you know truth, when you have studied and practiced all these things, and then someone tells you to do something that you know is bad, and you simply say, no, I will not do that. You're king of the world. Everyone will get out of your way. It's like the parting of the Red Sea with Moses. It's just like that. You'll just see it. The whole universe will just change so that you can be free, because freedom is earned, and it does require courage. So knowledge, care, and courage. When you have those three virtues and someone wants to coerce you to do something you don't want to do, doesn't matter how horrible it is. There's so many inspiring stories of history of great men who just said, no, buddy, I'm not going to do it. Your money changing is BS. You can't do this right outside the temple. No. That's why we still talk about Jesus 2,000 years later. He said no. In that instance, he just said no. Now, there was a lot more to, he would physically flip over the tables. That was a big no. But it's just the same. If he said, maybe we can make this, it's not so bad. Well, there were many people like that, and there still are today, and we don't talk about those people as much. They're not kings and queens. So here's a summary of natural law versus man's law. Natural law is based off principles and truth, which are inherent to creation. We cannot change them. Man's law is based on dogma or beliefs or mental constructs, and these are not inherent to creation. They are temporary, they can change, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Once again, it's really not even fair to call it law. It's rules and regulations. It's not actually law. Natural law is something you can harmonize with. Remember the vibration principle? So if there's a vibration and then I match that vibration, I start to resonate with it. And then there's harmony and then there's a good sound. So that's how we do natural law. But man's law, you don't harmonize with, you comply. You comply and you get rewarded, or you don't comply and you get punished. And this does work. I'm not saying, we shouldn't discipline anyone. We shouldn't train dogs and we shouldn't raise our children. Yes, of course it's useful to have a very basic, classical conditioning discipline system set up. I do the best I can with my students to know what is good, so they know what is good behavior, what is bad behavior, and so on. But the idea is it's not based on just, if you don't do this, I punish you. It's based on, this is truth. And so let's just, I'm just going to incentivize everyone to harmonize with truth as much as we can. And the more you do that, the more I will reward you. And the less you're able to do that, the more I will ignore you. This works especially well for young children, kindergartners, and women as well. If you're dating or married to a woman, one thing she hates more than anything else is ignoring her, not giving her attention, the silent treatment. This will destroy her spirit, will destroy her moods. You don't need to do anything more severe than that. That's a very severe punishment for many women and children and men too. Part of man's law, which is destroying our world today, is moral relativism and cultural relativism. The idea that, some people can do it their way and the other people can do it their way. No, that's not natural law, that's man's law. And that while there is a time and place for that, what we're seeing in the first world of the West today is a complete opposite polarity manifestation of this. There should be a bedrock cultural moral framework, structure, foundation upon which that we all agree on and upon which we can build our families and our society. And then when you have that structure solidly built in, which is exactly what I've seen in China and Japan, for instance, then you get to have that freedom where some guys have rice, some guys have noodles, and no one cares. So that's where relativism and opinion and belief and subjectivity, of course it has its place, but it does not have its place if one school teacher says heterosexuality is normative and good for society, and then another school teacher says, oh no, actually homosexuality is better because freedom, or whatever. That's not just like, we're both good teachers and he's just doing it a different way. No. I good teacher, he bad teacher. According to natural law, this is just how it works. And I'm going to get banned. Oh, by the way, did I tell you? Yeah, I've been banned. Natural law is eternal and immutable. Man's law changes all the time. Can be from the whim of a legislator or the court of public opinion. There's so many nonsense ways that man's law can change and hurt some people and not others, and all sorts of nonsense. As you can see, this slide here is about natural law expressions. I don't think I even need to go over this. It's so simple. When you understand and follow natural law correctly, you get all these positive things here. You get a world full of love, knowledge, sovereignty, freedom, and order. And when you go against natural law, which is exactly what's happening in many places of the world today, because we're following the media, we're following our government propaganda, and we're not following bona fide religions anymore. And those of us who are following religion are often fanatics, dogmatic. We're not actually doing the religion correctly. That's why it's not working. As I'm sure you all know, there are many fake gurus and priests who are raping children. That's obviously not what you're supposed to do according to the Bible or any Bible. So this is sin. This is corruption. This is going against natural law, which breeds fear, ignorance, confusion, control, and chaos. And this is perhaps the most simplified and practical summary of all natural law, which is right and wrong. There is no, moral relativism is a scam. It's a sham. It's a lie. It's not true. There are acts that are definitively right, and there are acts that are definitively wrong. And yes, it's true there are many that are gray in the middle. But the more we focus on the gray areas, the more we are leaving natural law, which we do not want to do. If you're in harmony with natural law, you are moral. If you're in opposition to natural law, you are immoral. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how much social status you have, if you're the president of a country, the CEO of a corporation. If your acts are causing harm to others, that is a wrong act. It is incorrect. It is not based in truth, and it is immoral, and it makes the world worse. It brings more chaos into the world, more suffering. And if you do actions that do not result in harm to other sentient beings, including yourself, and that actually promote goodness in the world, well, guess what? You're moral. You're acting in harmony with natural law, and your actions are correct. They are based in truth. This part here about force versus violence is a lot more subtle, but it's especially important for Americans who are interested in maintaining a Second Amendment in this country, which is very much up for grabs. I would not be surprised if in 10 or 20 years we don't have a Second Amendment anymore. Just like how we don't really have a First Amendment right now. We have it in paper, but because Americans don't care about actually practicing the First Amendment as a sacred aspect of natural law, which is what it is. The U.S. Constitution is based on natural law. That's why it's a beautiful constitution, which has been replicated all over the world, because it's not based on man's law. It's based on natural law. That's why the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights is so important and so effective, because it's not based on some king, some queen, some emperor, some religious figure. It's just law. It's just the law of nature applied to a social, political environment and structure. Self-defense, as you may know, is okay. You're always allowed to defend yourself, and actually you should. The only person who's most qualified to defend yourself is yourself. There are many who like to outsource that to someone else. Oh, the police will protect me. My husband will protect me. My father, my mother, whatever. That's totally natural and understandable. But just, you got to be careful with that. Because if we all do that, if we all, for instance, outsource our security to one man, to one king, and then, on a whim, he decides, oh, I don't like these people anymore. I'm just going to exploit them for profit. Well, that's history. That's why America exists, because we had centuries of corrupt kings who would just, cause trouble because they had power, and they didn't have a strong enough sense of natural law. They didn't care enough about themselves and their country and their subjects, so they just let it all get ruined. And then the revolutions happened, and in the end, I think it all is good, is that now, because now we can actually talk freely about this stuff. Of course, the problem is there's just so few people watching presentations like this that it's taking so long to complete this one great work. But because of the internet, even though there is censorship on the internet, if we all do our part, this can work. All you got to do is, if you've been with me up to this point, just stay with me. Just listen to myself, Mark Passio, Jesus, others. I'm not saying I'm in the same league as Jesus, but just find any person who can speak in the way you like to be spoken to, and who has truth on their side, not man's law truth, not subjective truth, actual truth, study it, understand it, practice it, get good at it, then you can teach others. And if we all do that, eventually, we're free. We're happy, we're free, and we don't suffer that much. So violence, what is violence? It's the immoral initiation of force, which is used to cause harm to others. But force can be fine. Like if someone is trying to coerce me into taking a vaccine and I say no, and I say it very politely at first, but they don't get the point, and then I say it with a bit more force, no. That's still okay. Because I'm just defending myself. I'm defending myself and the natural law. So I am allowed to use force. And you are as well. You don't need to wait for permission, for police, for a lawyer, for your family. No. When you understand natural law and you practice it, you will understand that you can use force. That's why we have a body and energy, is so we can use it. We can use force. That's totally fine. Violence comes from the word violate. So in one sense, all violence really is bad, but it depends how you do. A lot of people's definition of violence just means any sort of physical harm. So if I kill someone in self-defense, that according to natural law and how it's defined here, that's not actually violence. That's just using force to defend myself. There's actually no violation that happened. The violation was the other person who tried to kill me. But when I defend myself, that's fine. There's a great quote here from Immanuel Kant, a philosopher from the 1800s, I believe. Do the right thing because it is right. Aristotle talked about this explicitly, probably more than Kant, I believe. And you can find that in the Ethos Bible. It's called the Ethos book on my website, but I want to call it what it is. It's a Bible. Natural law means morality, doing what's right regardless of what you're told. But if you're following man's law, you are obedient, which is sometimes good. But if all you know is how to be obedient and you're just doing what you're told regardless of your own conscience, and I mean, basically it's a gamble whether this is going to work or not. If you're obedient to a good person who cares about you, that's really nice. That's fine. If you're obedient to a tyrant who just wants to, pardon the language, but suck the milk out of you like a cash cow or something, that's going to be a problem. Not just for you, but it'll externalize to everyone around you. All right, here we'll call the law of freedom. You want to be free? If you're listening to me and you're an American, I'm sure you do want to be free, and I'm sure you're not free because you do not follow the law of freedom. This is a law. It's not a rule, it's not a regulation, it's a natural law. As our morality increases, our freedom does too. So just as, in Japan, you're free to go anywhere and you basically never have to worry about being part of a mass shooting or some terrorist attack, they're more moral people. They're more moral than us. So they have that freedom that a lot of us don't have anymore. It's not because of some law. It's not because of the news, the media, the government. It's because of us and how immoral we are. And that's why I don't like living here anymore. It's not just that, I can tolerate people who are immoral, who want to be moral. I'm fine with that. But a lot of you guys, you really love just being a-holes. And you really don't care. You really don't care if your other countrymen are being killed. You just really don't care because you're immoral. And the more immoral you are, the less freedom we will all have. Freedom is also kind of comparable to health. So in this land of obesity, we don't have the freedom to have a long life expectancy. That's a freedom to live long. That's like a privilege that many of us don't have because we are not being moral with the food we eat. We're eating poison, so we're less free. We can't move as well. We can't live as long. We are suffering the consequences of our actions. That's the law of freedom. So spiritual currency, spiritual is a technical term here. It means even beyond natural law. That's what spiritual means. And it's just time and attention. Spiritual means also kind of like consciousness. So anything you do, if you want to do natural law, you want to do something else, that's fine. It all boils down to how to use your time, how to use your attention. And this is how we improve in morality. And when we improve in morality, we get more freedom by using our time and attention correctly. There's a very important point here about the words nescience versus ignorance. And this directly corresponds to what I said a few moments ago about how I don't like living in a culture of immoral people who don't want to be moral. If you're immoral, but you know that you're immoral and you want to improve, that's okay. We can work with that. But in the analogy, that's like nescience. That's like, you know there's something good out there, but you don't know what it is. And maybe one day, we'll see how it goes. That's nescience. But ignorance comes from the word ignore. It means you're deliberately ignoring something. You don't just not know it, you're pushing it away from yourself. This brings to mind the famous bit from Bill Hicks, who went to a Waffle House and he's reading a book by himself at, it's IHOP, whatever, same thing. And the waitress comes over and says, "Hey, what you reading for?" Not what are you reading? What are you reading for? As in, why are you reading? And Bill says, "Oh, gee, I don't know. Maybe so I don't one day grow up to be some crackhead waffle waitress like you." So there's been an epidemic for decades now in this country of not only people being stupid, not just that, but people actually dissing and hating on smart people. That's a problem. That's ignorance, which is worse than nescience. That's immoral activity. That's deliberately making everything worse. So we've got to improve in our teachability as well. Once again, I don't care if you think I'm a teacher or not a teacher, if you got a better teacher, I don't care. As long as you are teachable, then everything can get better. Take a look at this, copy this down. I'm not going to go over it. We should know how to think as well. This is also an important part of natural law and being a human. You have to know how to think. We were not taught how to think at school. I know you think we were not. Thinking is a 3-step process. It's very simple. You start with knowledge, then you understand that knowledge, and then you practice that understanding. You have wisdom. That's how to think. This is called the trivium from ancient Greece. So the actual Greek words we would use are grammar. You need to know the grammar of a field you're studying. So that might be in mathematics, as an analogy, grammar might be arithmetic. And then logic might be like algebra, like how to use all those different 1 + 2 = 3, how to use all those basic arithmetics in like a higher order form. That's logic. And then rhetoric is being able to explain that to someone else. If you have grammar and logic, but you don't have rhetoric, it means you're not done yet. You still don't know how to think. Thinking is not just for yourself. You have to be able to express it and communicate it to others. Otherwise, it means to everyone else, maybe you don't actually know what you're talking about. And a computer, or a modern analogy, would be input. So you get some information input to you, then you process it, and then you output it. And then after the output, you're going to get more input, and then the same process just keeps going over and over and over again. The key here is it really is that simple. Just like how natural law only has 7 or 8 principles, how to think has 3 steps, not 4 or 5 more. It's only those 3 steps. You don't need to do anything else. You just need to do those 3 steps all the time, over and over again, in whatever field you want to think about. Religion, art, science, doesn't matter. Friendships, doesn't matter. This word trivium comes, one of the roots is tree, like where we get triangle, right? The number 3. The threefold path to truth is basically what trivium means. Once again, if you are educated by a modern school system, this is, you could think of as an outcome-based education, which is nonsense. Oh, like I memorized all the things and then I got a good grade on the test. That means I know it. When you know something, it means I can give you something else. I can change the input. I can jam a fork in it. I can do something crazy with it that you haven't been trained on how to handle it. And I give it to you, and you'll know how to rearrange it back to the right way and then put it back to me and say, isn't that better? I'll say, wow, yeah, you really know it. So when we can think correctly, then we can act correctly. We can make the right decisions, which will lead to the right behavior, which will manifest in reality. Everything will manifest whether we like it or not. That's first principle, mentalism. Whatever we have in our mental world will manifest in reality. So trivium, how to think, we can just funnel that back to the basic natural law principles. It's the first principle, mentalism. The trivium is one technique you can use in the principle of mentalism. There are many others. Yoga, meditation, go for it. Knock yourselves out. But once again, if you're not doing something like that, you're a fool. You're asleep. When we have the right thoughts, the right emotions, and those two lead to right actions, then we have freedom and enlightenment, or the all-seeing eye. All right, my voice is so dying, so that's going to be it for today. I will be back with a part 2 where I will talk about the occult. Occult means hidden. Doesn't mean bad or good. It just means things that are hidden. And they're deliberately hidden from you so that people who do have this hidden knowledge can use it to overpower you, to dominate you, to exploit you, to take resources from you. So I will be telling you more about this occult so that you can be free, you can be less enslaved, and all of us together can also be more free, more moral, more grown up, not have as many, terrorist attacks. Lots of good things can happen. Thanks for listening. Peace on earth. God bless. Light the way.